We've been blessed to hear the music, to experience the hits and the brilliance. But what about the silence in between? You had Prodigy, Fife Dog, Jay Dilla, D'Angelo, Shock G. So many black men gone too soon, not from the spotlight, but from battles most of us never saw. Chronic illnesses, private struggles, the weight of expectations. They gave us everything while carrying that pain alone. And this episode isn't just about loss, it's about a pattern that's been passed down through generations because silence has been taught to us as survival and strength is endurance. What happens when that strategy keeps us alive but keeps us from living fully? This is Equity Matters, and we present to you the sound of silence. Boys don't cry. You're listening to Equity Matters, where we champion equity in every conversation. I'm Dr. James Bell III, public health leader and storyteller. And I've seen how stories outlast laws, speeches, and shape the world in ways legislation and policy just can't. The narratives that we share have the power to move hearts, shift culture, and change policy. So let's get into today's episode. You notice a pattern when you look at Black men in entertainment. So many are gone too soon. You had Prodigy of Mobb Deep gone at 42 from sickle cell complications. Chadwick Boseman, who gave us Black Panther, he quietly battled colon cancer for years before passing at 43. D'Angelo, whose music carried generations, has left us after a private fight with pancreatic cancer. And there's others, Heavy D, who battled health issues behind the scenes. Fife Dog of A Tribe Called Quest, who lost his life to diabetes complications at 45. These men shared their brilliance with the world, yet they carried battles that we never saw. Chronic illnesses, mental strain, societal pressures, all compounded by the expectation to appear strong and unshakable, untouchable even. And it raises a hard question. Why do so many of us Black men fight in silence? And what does it cost us? What does it cost us in life, in health, in our communities, when endurance has now become a survival mandate? Maybe the story here isn't about just quiet battles, but what about when we finally start telling them? Even when we see the consequences, when you see lives that have been cut short, or bodies that are worn down, and relationships that become strained, asking for help, it often feels impossible. And part of it is personal. Vulnerability has been coded as weakness for Black men. From childhood, many of us hear phrases like man up, handle your business, don't let them see you sweat. We internalize the idea that needing help means failing, like failing ourselves and failing our families. And part of it is cultural. Society rewards endurance and stoicism and visible success. The strong Black man is celebrated, the one who carries burden silently, who shows strength even when he's struggling inside, the one who speaks up about pain. Well, too often he gets dismissed, or he gets criticized, or he gets ignored. And part of it is structural. Our systems weren't built with our wellness in mind. Healthcare, mental health services, social supports, they frequently fail to meet Black men where we are. There's mistrust, there's past trauma, there's other barriers, financial, geographic. Those barriers that make reaching out feel risky or even futile. So we do what we've been taught to do. We endure. We push through. We smile. We make it work. But there's a cost. Chronic stress, untreated illness, isolation, grief. All of those things pile up. In 2024, Black or African American adults were diagnosed with hypertension or high blood pressure 26% more frequently than the total population. African Americans have higher rates of diagnosis and death from cancer compared to other racial groups. Black men are twice as likely to die from prostate cancer compared to white men with a higher incidence rate. and approximately 38.7% of Black men aged 20 and older have obesity. Even when we see the stakes, the act of asking for help can feel like stepping into unknown territory. It's a place where we might be judged and rejected, or for many of us, misunderstood. So, this resistance isn't just the individual choice, it's the echo of centuries of survival strategies, behaviors that once kept Black men alive, but in a modern context can keep us from thriving. And that brings us to history because to understand why so many Black men struggle with asking for help, we have to trace it back all the way to the plantation, to Jim Crow, to the ways that systemic oppression have shaped our survival instincts. That silence that we carry today is not new, it's inherited. It's been passed down as armor, as expectation, as something necessary to endure a hostile world. The relationship between Black men and silence is older than the nation's idea of freedom. It begins on the plantation where voice itself was dangerous. Speaking truth and showing emotion and even mourning openly could draw violence or death. So silence became a strategy. It was our language of survival. In those conditions, control over your body and words meant the difference between punishment and endurance. You had generations learn that keeping pain private was safer than being seen. It wasn't strength in the modern sense, but it was a necessity. And yet some of them refused to be quiet. One of my favorite stories as we think about African American history is that of Nat Turner, an enslaved preacher in Virginia. He witnessed the violence and cruelty of slavery firsthand, and he felt compelled to act. He led a rebellion in 1831, openly challenging a system designed to strip him of his voice and his humanity. He paid with his life. Turner was captured, executed, and the aftermath was brutal. They made new laws that made literacy, preaching, and assembly illegal for Black people across the South. And it created this message where if you speak out, you die. You stay silent and you survive. And so you have this tension between survival and expression, between endurance and vulnerability. It didn't go away with emancipation. It became part of our identity, and it was encoded into our behaviors and into our choices. It was now an expectation of the men who came after. And so to cry out was to invite pain, and to show fear was to risk being broken. You had generations that learned that keeping pain private was safer than being seen. Over time, that survival instinct evolved into what scholars today call John Henryism. It's a term named after the folk hero who worked himself to death trying to outperform the machine. John Henryism describes a high effort coping style, this relentless drive to succeed despite systemic barriers, to push harder in the face of discrimination, and to prove yourself through your work. It's this belief that if we just grind harder, we can overcome anything. But there's a cost. Research shows us that this mindset, while it can be adaptive in a hostile world, is directly linked to higher rates of hypertension, of heart disease, of chronic stress related illnesses, particularly among Black men. So, what was once a strategy for survival in many ways has become the blueprint for self destruction. The expectation to endure and to push through and to never show pain is worn the body down. We are told that being stoic is strength because having that composure earns respect. But for Black men, that composure isn't always a choice. It might be demanded in the workplace, in classrooms, even in love. Control yourself, which often really means don't make us uncomfortable. You're labeled as angry, as difficult, as ungrateful. But if you stay quiet, you disappear. Now you're unseen, unheard, and unconsidered. Either way, there's a cost. For some of us, it settles in the body. It settles in our backs, in our blood pressure, in our sleep. And for others, it shows up as anger, detachment, workaholicism, We become workaholics. We don't cry, we grind it out. That's me. I've been trying to cry for a year, but I can find myself working with no problem. I'm not known to say that I'm hurting, but I might say I'm tired, you know, or I might even just say I'm good. And that's not even to say that we don't feel deeply. We just learn to translate every emotion into motion because motion feels productive. It's safe because stillness, it feels too much like being vulnerable, like being exposed. I think about the moments where I've done it. I take on every project, saying yes when I should have said no, telling myself I'm being disciplined when really I'm just trying not to feel disappointed. People have always told me that I look calm, that I seem unbothered and composed, like nothing shakes me. And I'll be honest, I hate that. In this country, a calm black man is a respectable one. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't challenge too much. He doesn't make people uncomfortable. He's self contained. But we rarely ask what it costs to stay that way. That's the quiet conversation of pain. It becomes achievement, it becomes isolation, and it becomes hypertension. It becomes a story about strength that's killing us softly. And here's the thing, even when we do speak, the world doesn't always listen. Black men can cry out in pain physically, emotionally, spiritually, and can still be met with disbelief. It shows up in our hospitals first. Study after study tells us that Black patients' pain is routinely underestimated. Their symptoms are minimized, you got delayed diagnoses, and Black men are less likely to be prescribed pain medication, even when reporting the same level of pain as white patients. We die younger, not just because of what's happening inside our bodies, but because of how the system responds to our bodies. And when it comes to mental health, the silence deepens. We've been told therapy isn't for us, that talking about depression is weakness, that prayer alone should be enough. But behind closed doors, brothers are breaking. The numbers say it plainly. Suicide rates for Black men are climbing. Depression is underdiagnosed. And the fear of being seen as unstable keeps too many of us suffering in isolation. It reminds me of Ice Cube and Boys in the Hood, the last scene, when he says, either they don't know, don't show, or don't care about what's going on in the hood. That line has haunted me for years because it's not just about the news ignoring violence, it's about the way this country has learned to tune out Black suffering unless it's packaged neatly as entertainment or as data or something else that's digestible. We live in a world that doesn't just miss our pain, it manages it, it sanitizes it. It's been made invisible even when it's a glaring crisis. And I keep asking myself, what happens when generations of men are taught the only safe way to exist is quietly? Somewhere along the way, that toughness became our armor. It's a part of our identity. We've learned that pain was just proof of endurance, it was proof of manhood. It's the myth that says if I can survive it, it can't hurt me. But the truth is, it does. It always has. The myth of toughness didn't start with us, it was put on us. In slavery, Black men were praised for strength only when it served someone else's labor. Our worth was measured in muscle, not in mind, not in heart. We've gone from the fields to the factories to the front lines. Black men have been told that to be soft is to be disposable, that our value comes from what we can withstand, not what we can feel. So we lift more, we work longer, we sleep less, we keep it moving even when our bodies are screaming to rest because we confuse durability for divinity. But the body always keeps score, and so does the spirit. And here's the irony, we're dying from the very thing we think keeps us alive. Hypertension, heart disease, diabetes, all of those things are fed by stress and silence. The myth of toughness, it doesn't protect us, it's punishing us. When I think about brothers like D'Angelo, Prodigy, men who gave us everything while fighting battles that we never saw, I don't see weakness in their silence. I see the cost of a culture that tells us to fight until we fall. So, how do we break the pattern? If survival taught us to stay silent, endurance taught us to keep going, and toughness told us to never show pain, what would it look like to do the opposite? Breaking the pattern, it doesn't mean weakness, it means recognition. Recognition that our bodies, our minds, our hearts, they all carry the weight of generations. And that weight deserves care. It deserves attention and release. I wanted to start with us having conversation, speaking about pain, about exhaustion, about grief. Is naming it out loud, even when the world has trained us to hide it, even when the world doesn't always listen. And I won't lie, because I don't want to come across like I got this figured out. I still struggle with this. Even knowing that these behaviors should be different. I catch myself grinding too hard. I catch myself swallowing pain, trying to perform calm. It's a habit centuries in the making. So breaking it isn't going to be easy. And I have to remind myself daily, vulnerability is strength, not failure. And it matters not just for me, but for my family, for my wife who deserves to see me fully present. Joy, grief, fatigue and all. For my daughter who's learning what it means to be a woman in this world and what men are capable of modeling. For my sons who are watching me closely, learning the rules of manhood by my example. If I continue to hide and to endure silently, I teach them the same lessons I inherited: suppress, survive, and isolate. But if I show them that it's okay to ask for help, to rest, to mourn, to seek care, I'm teaching them something radically different: that resilience that includes life. It shows up in therapy, in mentorship, and brotherhood spaces where vulnerability is treated like courage. It's in leaders who model that strength is not about suppression. It's about showing up, and that's showing up fully with flaws and all. We've spent centuries being taught to survive at all costs. Now it's time to learn how to live, to redefine toughness, to reclaim silence as a choice and not an obligation, to let the next generation inherit not just endurance, but life, living fully, even in a world that doesn't always see us. That is the ultimate act of resistance. And in that resistance, we find not just survival, but we find transformation. So thank you for tuning in, for listening with care, and thinking critically about the stories we inherit and the ones we choose to pass on. I want to give a special thank you to my best friend from high school, my brother, Martell Dawson. He's a brilliant music producer, a creative mind who has always encouraged me to keep putting myself out there, to keep telling stories that matter. Martell also helped title this episode. It's a reminder that the work that we do is never just on our own. It's shaped by the people who believe in us, who hold us accountable, and push us to show up fully. I want you all to stay reflective, to stay courageous. This has been Equity Matters, because equity always matters.